وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اجعلنا هذه الحلقات خالصة لوجهك الكريم واجعلها في ميزان حسنات يوم نلقاه. Um, First of all, I would like to thanks everyone for joining us in this webinar. My name is Muhammad Nazmul Haq from Accounting Research Institute. Today we are presenting this session on spiritual governance in the age of pandemic. And our respected speaker for this webinar is Dr. Ahmed Al-Muhammadi. Uh, Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for giving us time. We are very delightful for your time, and inshallah, we'll be enjoy your speech. And for your information, this webinar organized by Accounting Research Institute, University Technology Mara, Malaysia. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. I will bring them up at the end of the presentation. Now, let me allow to share our speaker's short biography. Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi is an assistant professor at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, International Islamic University, Malaysia. Dr. Ahmad, he was invited in 2011 to assist the Special Branch Counter-Terrorism Division, Royal Malaysia Police, Prison Department, and Ministry of Home Affairs. He was also appointed as member of De-Radicalization Panel and expert by the Ministry of Home Affairs. In 2019, Dr. Ahmad served as consultant to the United Nations Development Programs to study the return of foreign terrorist fighters in Southeast Asia. He also served as think tank member and consultant the Institute for Youth Research Malaysia, Ministry of Youth and Sports Malaysia. Currently, he is part of the research team to develop Malaysian National Action Plan for countering and preventing violent extremism, initiated by the Institute of Public Security of Malaysia under Ministry of Home Affairs. Besides that, he also serves as advisory committee member at Global Peace Institute London, and he is the associate fellow at the Accounting Research Institute, University Technology Mara, Malaysia. Now, without further ado, we'll turn the time over to our respected speaker, Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi, to deliver his speech on spiritual governance in the age of pandemic. فليتفضل مشكورا Dr. Ahmad.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator, Dr. Nazmul Haq.
Yes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahil aliyyil azim. First and foremost, I would like to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to the organizer, that is Accounting Research Institute, University Technology Mara, especially Professor Jamalia and her team at ARI, for inviting me to share my thought in this event. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing and rahmah and giving us the opportunity to gather here this evening, the circle of knowledge, and I hope that it would be one of the Garden of Eden as mentioned in the hadith. First and foremost, let me begin the talk tonight by sharing with you the problem that I face, and I believe that many people also, many other people also face the same kind of things, same challenges. What is the problem and what is the challenge? The challenge is sometimes, well, it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes we feel highly motivated, highly motivated to perform our ibadah. And we pray at the early hours of time, and then we wake up for tahajjud, recitation of the Quran, we perform zikr, and so forth. But sometimes we also have the moment, we also have the day that we don't feel, we feel lazy about doing those kind of things. We pray very late and we feel like we don't want to do anything. And we feel like very hard to do even a simple thing. So that is the experience. And I believe that some of us, many of us, having the same kind of experience in their life. So this led me to think about, I believe that we need to do something about this. So this led me to think about talking about the governance. Okay, so I think that in the context of disciplining ourselves of ibadah, we need the system of governance such as discipline, enforcement, evaluation, monitoring mechanism, improvement in our spiritual life. So I think this is the why I'm going to talk about the spiritual governance in the context of the pandemic. And I choose the pandemic is because the pandemic is actually present to us an opportunity for, if I use the word by Abdul Hakim Murad, he said that pandemic present to us an opportunity for self-isolation. Isolation in the context of Sufi person is an uzla for self-purification. That is for istighfar, for tazkiyat an-nafs, self-purification of the soul through the performance of ibadah, through zikr, through istighfar, and so on and so forth. So that is the reason why I really wish to talk about this, and I hope that this discussion would be very beneficial to all of us here. And so that is the first point. The second point I would like to mention is when we talk about governance, yeah, definitely many of us been listening to the term governance in many part of the discussion, whether it is in the public space, in the academia. Well, I think that if you are in the Islamic banking, you listen to the word or hear the word good governance, for example, or the corporate governance. So if we talk from that perspective, definitely it refers to the good governance in terms of organization, in terms of the government bureaucracy, in terms of association. But my talk tonight is not going to focus on that. My talk tonight is going to focus on the governance in the personal and spiritual life. So when we look at the word or the term governance is all about the process of governing. The process of governing, setting the goal, and the proper implementation based on the objective and the enforcement of rule and discipline, monitoring, evaluation, and assessment. So so that we can produce a quality outcome or product. So based on the job that we produce at the highest level. So I think that is in essence the idea of governance. Or I mean, why do we need governance? Either in the organization or in life itself. However, some people might say that how can we apply the principle of governance in our life? Because governance is usually applied in the context of organization or association. It may not be applicable to human life. Well, I think this lead me to the point number 3. If you look at Imam Al-Ghazali's work, especially Kimiyatu Sa'ada, Al-Ghazali wrote a very, very interesting work entitled Kimiyatu Sa'ada, or in English they call it Alchemy of Happiness. In his book, in the first chapter of his book, Al-Ghazali discussed about the nature of human being, which he described as alam saghir. Al-Ghazali described human being as the microcosm, as a small alam, or the small universe, right? Who are living in alam saghir, or the macrocosm, the bigger universe. So human being, according to Al-Ghazali, or Al-Ghazali describe it as alam saghir, or the microcosmos, or small universe. So human being, according to Al-Ghazali, reflect the alam kabir, that is a microcosmos. Because if we look at what we find in the microcosmos can be found in the microcosmos, can be found in a human being. However, what we can find in microcosmos, or the alam saghir, cannot be found in the macrocosm, that is alam kabir, especially in the context of ruh, for example. So this is a very interesting idea that put forth by Al-Ghazali, that he described human being as the small universe. So if we compare, according to Al-Ghazali, human being, in the real world, alam kabir, the macrocosm, we can find there is an animal kingdom, for example. We have plants coming out from the earth, water, we have rivers, we have ocean, and so on and so forth. So Al-Ghazali said, in human life as well, in human body as well, we can find the same thing. We can find, for example, the hair on human body, for example, representing the plants in the real life. We also can find, for example, the animal kingdom in the real life. In human body as well, we also can find a lot of bacteria and viruses. In the real world, we have, for example, a lot of corruption, a lot of bad things that happen. Human beings face challenges. In human life as well, we also have to fight. We have to confront, for example, the challenge of desire. We face the same thing. Therefore, I think that it is very, very relevant for us to talk about governance in the context of human being as well. What is more, according to Al-Ghazali, inside human body, there is a special thing. They call it al-qalb, the hearts. So in Al-Ghazali conceptions, al-qalb, the heart, is representing a king. The king who has a throne in human body. And while other limbs like hand, feet, eyes, and so forth, representing soldiers who execute the order of the king. And this is consistent with the prophetic tradition in the hadith mentioned, inna fil jasadi mudghah, iza salahat, salahal jasadu kullu, wa iza fasadat, fasal jasadu kullu, ala wa hiya al-qalb. Beware, in the prophet say that inside human body, there is a piece of flesh. If the flesh become good, the whole body become good. And if the flesh becomes spoiled, the whole body becomes spoiled. And that is the heart. So this is consistent with the Al-Ghazali's conception of Al-Qalb as the king, while the limb of human body as the soldiers. So whenever we have king here in the body of human being, definitely it requires certain kind of governing, the act of governing in our life as well. And human being also will face corruption. In the real life, for example, human being constantly facing corruption. Corruption in the human organization, corruption in society. Similarly, in human life, we also face corruption. Corruption in terms of facing the desire, for example. facing the bad behavior, facing the evil, which become the motivator of corruption in human life. So in our 24 hours life, it's involved, we always engage in constant struggle actually. We have if we talk about the real life, we always talk about negotiation. In organization or in politics, we talk about negotiation. In human life, we always actually facing internal negotiation. We always in the state of negotiating with our desires. The struggle between the power of evil and the power of faith, of Iman, for example. So by that comparison, we can say that, therefore, governance, the act of governing is needed in human life as well. And this is also mentioned in the Quran, for example, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 13. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. Human being, Allah said that I will create a khalifa on earth. A Mufassirin classify khalifa in this to describe or to explain these verses as Khalifa al-Amma and Khalifa al-Khassa. Khalifa al-Khassa referring to the political leadership, like the real Khalifa or the Sultan, Ulil Amri. While the Khalifa al-Amma is the general Khalifa, is referring to entire human being. So by default, by right, all of us consider to be Khalifa, given the fact that we are required to lead ourselves to salvation, to govern ourselves to salvation. So therefore, when we talk about Khalifa, definitely the act of governing is also relevant. So in this discussion tonight, I would like to mention 6 principles of good governance in our spiritual life. When I talk about spiritual governance, therefore, I refer to the act of governing of spiritual life based on certain principles such as sincerity of intention, discipline, focus, consistency, trustworthy, and so forth. So here I would like to share with you 6 principles of good governance in our spiritual life. The first principle is the principle of Tawheed. That is ibadah based on faith, based on Iman. That is why in the Quran mentioned, Innal ladhina amanu. Innal ladhina amanu, that is the first stage. That is to have a faith in ourselves. That is based on Tawheed. Wa amilus salihat. And therefore, perform a good deeds or amal salih. So that is amal salih or the ibadah that we are conducted, that we are performed in our life is actually rooted in Tawheed. Must be rooted in Tawheed. And Tawheed is actually representing a true liberation, the true freedom for humanity. That's why all the prophets came to bring Tawheed, because that is going to present freedom and true liberation from the spiritual enslavement, mental enslavement, and of course political enslavement. So when the prophet came, for example, in the age of ignorance, in the period of Jahiliyyah in Mecca, he brings Tawheed. He did not bring wealth, he did not bring development, but he bring an idea. That is Tawheed. And from that idea, he developed civilization. So Islamic civilization is actually, the essence of Islamic civilization is built upon Tawheed. Similarly, in our life, Tawheed must be the focus, must be the principle upon which every action that we do, our ibadah, is based on that. So that is the first principle of governance in our spiritual life. Second is ikhlas, sincerity of intention. That is, the act of ibadah is performed for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the material rewards, not even for the reward of the heaven, but to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is mardatillah. achieving mardatillah, meaning that ibadah is performed sincerely, without any attachment, without any condition to other things, but for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I may use the word economic term, pegging, the concept of pegging our intention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very important in ibadah. Because if we peg our intention to the material reward will devalue over time. Material reward or material thing will lose its value over time. It is not eternal. However, if we peg our intention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of performing ibadah, the value of ibadah will be eternal, because Allah is the eternal, al-baqa. So there is an eternity of intention. And because of that, there is an eternity of our ibadah, which can be carried forward to the hereafter. But if we peg the intention is for the sake of the world, then when the value of the material world devalue, and there is no value at all. So there is no meaning. That's why God say that whoever perform ibadah for the sake of other thing, for the sake of riya, for example, showing off, you go to the person and seek that reward from them. It is not from me. So the principle of ikhlas is very, very important, because it will determine the quality of our ibadah. As mentioned in the concept ihsan, that is, anta abudallah ka'annaka tarahu, fa'in lam takun tarahu fa'innahu yaraka. You are performing ibadah as if you are seeing Allah, but if you are not seeing Allah, Allah sees you. So that is the focus of the ibadah that we are seeking for in a good governance, or in the governance, spiritual governance. Number 3, the principle of amana. Amana, that is trust. Performing ibadah with full of trust, meaning that the sense of duty that we have to carry this trust with care, and we take that amana seriously, meaning that we do not do it for the sake of doing it. Because there are some people who are just performing ibadah just for the sake of performing it, just for the sake of fulfilling the requirement of ibadah. So if that is the case, then the quality of ibadah is just like it is a major quality of ibadah, is a secondary quality, a substandard ibadah. But when the person do it with sincerity, with a sense of trust and amana, the person will do it seriously, full-heartedly, with a full sense of responsibility when the person is doing it. So that is the third principle. So I think that if we, for example, even though a simple thing, even though giving charity, for example, sadaqah, with a small amount of money, but when a person do it with a sense of sincerity, with amana, the reward would be exponential. So that is number 3. Number 4 is istiqamah, consistency and discipline. So this is the challenge. As I said earlier, sometimes we have a day that we feel very motivated. We feel highly motivated to do ibadah, to perform our ibadah. But sometimes we also face a difficulty, or we feel challenge. We have to fight with ourselves. The internal struggle that we have inside, to fight with our desire in one hand, and to fight with the challenge, our surrounding, that we are not capable of actually overcoming that. However, with a strong istiqamah, discipline and consistency, we can overcome that challenge. So istiqamah is a very, very challenging thing to do, definitely. But with the consciousness of istiqamah, meaning that the need to do it with discipline, forcing oneself. Al-Ghazali said one of the requirements for a change, for personal change, is to force oneself to change. And to not only to force oneself to change, but to repeat to do it, to repeat doing it. That is the principle of repetition. From this repetition, it will create habits. And from this habit, it creates consistency. So that's how istiqamah is acquired, or habit is acquired. But it must start with the force. We have to force ourselves to do it. So that is the fourth principle. The fifth principle is the principle of mujahada, that is struggle, striving hard to achieve the objective. I think this is another important thing as well. This is also another challenge that we have, mujahada, that is to strive very hard to execute something, to implement something, to perform something, even though a simple thing, sometimes we cannot do it. For example, wake up into subuh prayer in the early hours. To some people, is the most challenging things. It requires strong desire. It requires a strong strength inside. That is mujahada. To wake up in the early hours of the night for subuh prayer, even though it's a simple thing, but it requires a great strength to do it. Yeah, okay, so this is another principle, because a lot of people, whenever they have strength, they would do it. Whenever they don't have motivation, they don't do it. All right, so, well, of course, whenever they don't do it, meaning that they fail to overcome, or they fail in negotiation with desire, with nafsu. So, as I said earlier, life every day is actually about the constant negotiation, internal negotiation between the power of reason and the power of desire. So we are constantly in the state of negotiation, battling this, the power of desire, and between the power of desire and the power of reason. And the last principle that I would like to share with you is the principle of muhasabah. Muhasabah is, if we translate in the context of governance, it is an evaluation. Muhasabah is an evaluation of every action that we have, whether there is some weaknesses that we might do and that need improvement. So muhasabah is requires continuous and consistent monitoring and improvement in every action, in every ibadah that we perform in daily life. So muhasabah is very important, and it is needed, and it has to be performed regularly. And every time that we perform ibadah, for example, or spiritual activities, we try to evaluate whether it is done according to the highest standard, or it is done just based on the for the sake of fulfilling the requirement. Okay, so I think these are the 6 principles. Start with the principle of Tawheed, Ikhlas, Amanah, Istiqamah, Mujahada, and Muhasabah. I think that if we continue doing this, if we apply this spiritual governance, it will lead to a more balanced life. It will lead to fulfillment, meaningful life. So the quality of our life is actually determined by the spiritual governance, because spiritual governance determines the quality of our ibadah. And ibadah is the only asset, that we carry to the next world. I repeat again so that I remember this. Ibadah is the only asset that we carry to the next world, not the wealth that we accumulated in this world, not the degree that we have. If we talk about writing publication, not the publication and writing that we published, but is the good deeds that we have performed in this world in relationship with Allah and other fellow beings. So that will determine the ending part of our life. Sometime in this world, it is not about the beginning. Sometimes people have a very rough beginning. They have a very bad beginning. But the ending is good. But sometimes we have people like a very beautiful beginning, but the ending is bad. I remember I was one visiting prison, and the prison commissioner told me, do you want to see the last row men, the people who are going to be hanged because of they were sentenced by hanging? And I said, sure. So he brought me to a very big cell and very far off from the other cells. And he said that, so these are the last row people who is going to be hanged whenever we have the dates of execution. So he said that, come on, go and talk to this guy, because this guy will be hanged anytime, actually. So I went up and I asked him, what do you feel being the last man, being the last row person? And the man looked at me and said, when I remember of death, I just only focus on what matters most in my life. I do not have the time to think about the pleasure. I do not have the time to think about doing bad things for other people. I have gone through all this. At the end of my life, I'm going to leave the world with a clean heart. I forgive everybody, and I will leave this world peacefully. That experience actually left a very, very big impression in my life, a very big lesson in my life, that if you want to be successful, of course, in the hadith also mentioned that the most successful people is the person who always remember of death, zikrul maut. I remember one politician, when people said to him that we have to remember of death. He is a very, very well-known politician, still alive. People told him about we have to remember of death in order to be successful. And he said that if you keep remembering of death, you cannot develop, he said. He actually misunderstood the concept of remembrance of death. Remembrance of death is actually make the person very serious, make the person focus on what matters most in our life. You may ask those people who are sitting in hospital right now because of COVID, do you think that this person is having a time to think about doing bad things to other people? No, they don't have a time for that. They will focus on what matters most in their life. Their beloved ones, something that they would remember, something that they have done, and someone that they need to seek forgiveness for. So these are the things that they always remember. So I think that if we put just a little bit of spiritual element in our life, that would set the balance. Because living in this world today, sometimes we become so engrossed with it. We forget actually the death is just one step away from our life. So I think, I hope that this sharing is useful. It is also a reminder for myself and reminder for all of you here. And inshallah, we benefit from this tazkirah, and we become a very good person in this world and hereafter. So I stop here and I hand over to moderator. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we just now enjoyed a very delightful and very nice tazkirah. and we knew very interesting things from scholars. And Alhamdulillah, he mentioned 6 principles that we can make our life more enjoyable and more towards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I thank you very much to our respected speaker, Dr. Ahmad Al Muhammadi, for your nice presentation, nice speech. Now I would like to open for Q&A session. Um, we saw some of our audience, they raised their hand. So I would like to invite to ask your question. Please unmute your mic and ask the speaker. I can see Dr. Mahmoud raised a hand. Yes.
Assalamualaikum, Ahmedullah.
Walaikum salam, please.
Jazakallah khair, brother, for a nice discussion. I have one question regarding your point number 2. You mentioned about the niyyah, how we can purify our niyyah. This is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the point is, most cases of our activities is linked with dunya and our akhirah. So suppose our activities, our job, our incomes, even our other aspects of ibadah. So how can we distinguish it? This is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And rather than, because our income is also involved here, our works, activities, everything linked with incomes or family or other issues, social issues, even our promotions, our KPI, lots of issues. But how can I ensure that this is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. This is a very, very difficult question. But let me put it this way. In our religion, we are taught that every action that we do, especially in the context of ibadah, because ibadah can be categorized into the ibadah al-khassah, which is referring to the special ibadah that we have to perform, which is an obligation for us to do, such as prayer and all these 5 obligatory things that Muslim has to perform, zakat, fasting, and so on. So this is considered to be ibadah al-khassa, which is actually very straightforward, and we do it for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of other things. But ibadah al-khassa, which actually refers to something that we do, something which is permissible that we can do, like work, study, and do other thing in life. But of course, when we do certain things, and there is something else in between, that intervening factors in our work, we can actually having that kind of intention. Okay, we do it for the sake of getting the reward, for example. But getting the reward alone is not the only intention. But the intention is to do it sincerely. While doing it, while having this intention of getting the reward, material reward, but do it with a sense of fulfilling the obligation that has been entrusted upon us, even though the person is not actually watching us doing it, is actually can be considered as the do it for the sake of Allah as well. So we can have, like, for example, we can have the primary intention is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The secondary intention is for the sake of reward. But it must be consistent. However, I must emphasize that having the sense of do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will do it, we will perform the action at the highest level of the quality possible. So even though the person did not actually watching us, do not supervise our work, but we are doing it with full sincerity and also responsibly. So I think there is no conflict, therefore, between having the intention of for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time, we also wanted to do it in order to get the rewards.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad. Anyone else? Do you have any question? I have a question, Dr. Ahmad.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, as you mentioned from the beginning of the speech, that one of the hadiths you mentioned, ala ala an inna fil jasadi mudgha, and the end of the hadith, ala wa hiya al-qalb. So we know that your first principle is niyya, and makanun niyya also is the qalb. So sometimes our iman yazid wa yanqis. I mean the increase and decrease. So in that situation, how do we purify our qalb to make them up? Our qalb to make qalb with the faith. How do we purify our heart in that situation?
This mentioned in the hadith, yes, al-iman yazid wa yankus. Well, actually, that is the nature of the heart. That is the nature of the faith. It changes over time. And one of the way that we can maintain the level of our faith is, one is through the dua. That's why we are encouraged to say that, Ya muqallibal qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. We may underestimate, or we may say that dua is nothing, prayer is nothing, just a word. But actually, in our tradition, dua matters a lot. Dua matters a lot. Dua actually have a function in human life, has a function in spiritual life. So dua represent commitment. Dua represent hope. Dua represent an invocation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He can actually deliver. He is the only person, He is the only one that He can deliver. So that is the first. Second one is through consistency, as I said. That's why in Islam we have consistency in everything that we do. Try to look at the prayer, for example. We pray every day for the rest of our life. I mean, we perform 5 daily prayers every day. We wake up in the morning and start with subuh and so on, and with isha. Every day we do it. What is the reason? Repetition actually maintain or generates or increase or maintain the level of faith. So if there is no such kind of consistency in our action, then there wouldn't be an effect. So yazid wa yanqus is actually the byproduct of the action. Byproduct of the action. It must start with the action. And Islam put in place a system in which everybody has to adhere on daily basis. You have to force yourself to do it. Only then it will generate the outcome. It will generate the result. So we have to create that environment. You cannot wait and say that, oh, I'm waiting for a motivation to do it. No, that is not the principle. The principle is you have to act on it. Only then from that action, it will produce the outcome. So Islam says that, yes, al-iman yazid wa yanqus, but we have a system in place that you have to follow in order to sustain that faith. If you stop doing it, it will go down and continuously going down, just like a ripple effect. So that is the method that we do it. And of course, we sustain it with the amalan sunat, for example, something like recitation of the Quran and istighfar and so on and so forth, in order to sustain that kind of level of faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your nice explanation. Anyone else want to share or want to ask anything to our respected speaker? I think that's all from our audience. At the end, thank you everyone, and especially thanks to our respected speaker, Dr. Ahmed Mohammadi. And we appreciate you being here. Special thanks goes to our Director, Professor Dr. Jamalia Said, and Deputy Director, Associate Professor Dr. Sharifah Nur Zihan Syed Yusuf, and all the organizer for organizing this amazing webinar. May Allah bless you all, and thank you everyone again for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time. Before we finish our session, we'd like to take a picture. Could you please open your camera if possible? Yes. Dr. Zihan, want to take picture? Okay.
Dr. Zihan, unmute.
Okay. Smile, everyone. That was what I was saying just now. Alright. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Another one more. Okay. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining with us. Inshallah, see you on next event.
Thank you very much. Inshallah, we see you again. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Thank you,
You're
everyone.
Thank you.
Pak Mansur, apa khabar?